The bulldozer engine was still rumbling when I pulled up in my unmarked SUV that morning. Through the dust cloud, I could see her standing there in her designer capri pants and sun visor, waving her arms like she was conducting the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Except instead of music, she was orchestrating the destruction of my family's 80-year-old lake cabin. I stepped out slowly, letting my state investigator badge catch the morning sunlight just right. The demolition crew operator saw it first and immediately killed his engine. That's when she noticed me. She marched over with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences in her life, and said in her shrill voice, "Excuse me, you cannot park here. This is an active HOA authorized work zone." I held up my credentials and said, calmly, "Patricia Harrington. I'm Detective Ryan Foster with the State Attorney General's office. I'm here to investigate a crime." I looked past her at the splintered wood and twisted metal that used to be my grandfather's cabin and added, "Lucky for both of us, I don't have to go very far to find it." The color drained from her face faster than water through a broken dam. Let me back up and explain how we got here. I'm not your typical lakefront property owner. While my neighbors at Pine Ridge Lake spent their weekends hosting wine tastings and comparing yacht sizes, I spent mine in a modest cabin that had been in my family since 1946. As a senior investigator for the State Attorney General's office, I dealt with white-collar crime, fraud, and corruption cases all week. That cabin was my escape, my sanctuary, where I could fish for bass, watch the heron, and drink coffee in blessed silence. The cabin wasn't fancy. Hell, it wasn't even modern, but it was mine. Legally deed to my family long before Pine Ridge. Estates and their precious HOA even existed. That's what we call grandfathered in. A concept that Patricia Harrington, our illustrious HOA president, either couldn't understand or chose to ignore. Patricia was the kind of person who measured grass height with a ruler and once tried to find a veteran for displaying an American flag on a non-desated flag day. She ran the HOA like her personal kingdom, and she had decided my cabin was public. Enemy number one. It started with passive-aggressive notes about aesthetic standards. According to Patricia, my cabin's natural wood siding was, and I quote, aggressively non-conforming to community visual guidelines. She claimed the stone chimney my grandfather built by hand was architecturally hostile to the neighborhood's modern Cape Cod theme. I ignored her notices. I had every legal right to. The property predated the HOA by 40 years, and I had the paperwork to prove it. But Patricia wasn't used to being ignored. The harassment escalated quickly. She filed complaints about non-existent noise violations, claiming she could hear the loons calling at night from her house 3 amami away. She hired a surveyor who mysteriously determined my cabin encroached 6 in onto HOA common land, despite county records showing otherwise. She even tried to get the fire department to condemn the place, but the inspector took one look at my documentation and told her to stop wasting his time. Then came the Thursday that changed everything. I was in the state capitol testifying in a major construction fraud case. Patricia must have been watching, waiting for her opportunity. While I was under oath in a courtroom 200 meters away, she made her move. Without a permit, without a court order, without even a legitimate HOA vote. She hired a demolition crew and told them it was an emergency blight removal. By the time my neighbor, Mrs. Davidson, called me in tears, it was too late. 80 years of family history had been reduced to splinters and memories. The photo albums from my parents' wedding, the handmade furniture my grandfather crafted during the Depression, the stone fireplace where 4 generations had gathered for Christmas, all of it was gone. The demolition crew had been thorough. They'd even ripped out the foundation. I drove back that night in complete silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. But I wasn't just angry. I was focused. Patricia Harrington had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd committed a crime against someone who investigated crimes for a living. The next morning, I didn't just file a police report. I opened an official state investigation into HOA malfeasance, unlawful demolition, destruction of property, and potential racketeering. I treated it like any other case, except this time it was personal. I started with subpoenas. Every HOA document from the past 5 years landed on my desk within a week. What I found was a gold mine of corruption. Meeting minutes had been altered after the fact. Property maps had been redrawn to justify violations. Over $70,000 in HOA funds have been diverted to something called beautification seminars that turned out to be spa weekends for Patricia and her inner circle. But the smoking gun was the demolition invoice. Right there in black and white was Patricia's signature authorizing the destruction of my cabin. She'd even written urgent removal required in her own handwriting. The demolition company, facing their own legal troubles for operating without proper permits, immediately cooperated with my investigation. They told me everything. How Patricia had called them personally, insisted it was an emergency, and paid them in cash to work quickly. How she'd stood there taking photos while they destroyed my family's legacy, actually celebrating as the walls came down. Then my investigation uncovered something Patricia hadn't counted on. 3 years earlier, I'd successfully petitioned to have the cabin registered as a local historic landmark due to its age and craftsmanship. It was protected by state law. She hadn't just destroyed private property. She demolished a registered historic structure, which is a felony. The witnesses started coming forward. 17 neighbors shared their own horror stories about Patricia's reign of terror. The elderly woman she'd harassed about her garden gnomes until she moved. The young family she'd fin $800 for having the wrong shade of beige on their shutters. The disabled veteran she tried to evict for having a therapy dog without HOA approval. I compiled everything into a comprehensive case file. Criminal charges for destruction of historic property, felony vandalism, conspiracy, fraud, and misuse of fiduciary funds. Civil charges for intentional infliction of emotional distress, conversion, and trespass. I even found evidence of tax evasion related to those spa weekends. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. Patricia was at the country club holding court at her regular table, no doubt complaining about some minor infraction she'd observed on her morning power walk. The state police walked right up to her table, past the shocked faces of her brunch companions, and placed her under arrest. Her mug shot was priceless. Mascara running, her perfect hair destroyed, her mouth open in shock. The Pine Ridge Gazette ran it on the front page with the headline, HOA President Arrested for Historic Destruction. The trial was swift. I testified not as the victim, but as the lead investigator, presenting the mountain of evidence I'd compiled. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue she was acting in the community's best interest, but the judge wasn't buying it. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in state prison, though she'd probably serve 18 months with good behavior. The fines totaled $450,000. The HOA was dissolved by court order, its assets liquidated to pay damages to victims. I sued Patricia personally in civil court and won a judgment of $2, $3 million. Her house, her cars, her precious country club membership, all of it had to be sold to pay the settlement. With the money, I rebuilt the cabin exactly as it had been, using old photos and blueprints I'd kept in a safety deposit box. Every detail was perfect, from the hand-carved door frame to the slightly squeaky porch step. I added a few modern touches, though, namely a comprehensive security system with cameras, covering every angle. I also installed a motion-activated speaker near the driveway. Whenever someone approaches, it plays a recording of the judge reading Patricia's guilty verdict. Just a little reminder of what happens when you mess with someone's family legacy. Patricia got out of prison after 16 months. Last I heard, she was working at a cell phone repair shop in Riverside, living in a studio apartment above a pizza place. Someone told me she flinches whenever she hears the word permit. As for me, I took early retirement and now teach a seminar at the community college called Property Rights and You. Don't let anyone bulldo your dreams. The first slide of my presentation is Patricia's mug shot. The second is a photo of my rebuilt cabin. The third is a simple message that says, know your rights. The cabin stands stronger than ever, a testament to the fact that justice, while sometimes slow, has a way of catching up with those who abuse their power. Every morning, when I have my coffee on the porch watching the sunrise over Pine Ridge Lake, I think about Patricia in her studio apartment, and I smile. She learned the hard way that you should never bulldo the family cabin of someone who investigates crimes for a living, especially when that cabin turns out to be a protected historic landmark. 3 years in prison and $3 million in damages. Her shocked face when the judge read the sentence was the last thing anyone saw before they led her away in handcuffs.